The Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra has announced a new avenue for aspiring composers to share their works and a new way to honor a beloved patron. The orchestra has announced the Michael Nesbitt Composers Institute that will take place as part of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. The institute, which has been a part of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra's output for several years in various forms, will see new composers receiving mentorship opportunities and performances of their works by the WSO. Haralabos Stafylakis is the composer in residence of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra and the curator of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. Joins us now. Hello.
Hello, Nolan. Pleasure to join you as always.
Thanks so much for being here again. First of all, maybe what does it mean to have this sort of new dedication of Mr. Nesbitt's support for new music here in Winnipeg?
Well, how much time do you have? It means a whole lot. It really does. I mean, the WNMF Composers Institute, I founded it with the WSO in my first season when I joined in 2016, 2017 season. And we've been running it almost continuously since then. There were a couple of dark years because of COVID and that sort of thing. But, this is going to be our 7th season. And it firstly, the fact that we are now naming it, inaugurating the Michael Nesbitt Composers Institute, shows just the tremendous amount of support that the WSO has had for this initiative. I mean, it's not an obvious thing. Not many of these kinds of things exist, that a professional orchestra puts so many resources, so much attention, so much effort and time towards just developing contemporary classical music at the grassroots level with young emerging composers. And to honor it and our premier patron, our longtime premier patron, Michael Nesbitt, by joining forces in this way. To me, that seems incredibly significant. But, I'm playing inside baseball because this is my baby, too.
Absolutely. Maybe you can take us back to the generation of, that baby, the Composers Institute, when you first started with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, as you mentioned. What did that support from the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra look like in those sort of early iterations, and maybe how was the encouragement of someone like Mr. Nesbitt able to champion it to the point where we're naming this institute after him?
Yeah, really where it started was in the 2014 with the New York Philharmonic's biennial festival, which I, as a young composer, relatively new to New York City, having moved there from Montreal for graduate school and trying to find my way into a professional career while working on my doctorate, and through a variety of support and coincidence and luck and hard work and all of that, ended up being selected by the American Composers Orchestra, which is a professional orchestra that's dedicated to contemporary music, being selected to participate in their annual ACO Underwood New Music Readings. And that year just so happened that they had partnered with a New York Philharmonic, and the Philharmonic was presenting the Underwood New Music Readings, the orchestral readings of 6 young composers, emerging composers, as part of their citywide festival. And that was a huge deal and really helped to launch. I had been working as a professional, but I was still young and sort of unproven and just on my way up. And that was really helped put me on the map and launch my professional career. And from there, my orchestral music started getting performed, getting the notice of conductors and orchestras. And no coincidence that just 2 years later, I got the appointment as composer in residence of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. To me, it's a direct line to that.
Yeah. Wow. So then, as you were starting with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra as composer in residence, and as you are getting this Composers Institute started in that direct line that you were just talking about, what do you recall about your first interactions with Mr. Nesbitt and his support for contemporary classical music?
Right. So to me, it was obvious that if I and my colleagues had benefited so much from programs like the Underwood New Music Readings, that now that I had the platform at the WSO to potentially do something like that, what was surprising is it was a bit of a pie in the sky kind of idea. Like, hey, can we marshal the resources of the entire symphony orchestra in the organization and start performing the works of unproven young composers and put them on the big stage? And there was just yeah, sounds good. What do you need? Cool. Well, I'll need mentor composers. I'll need major artists to mentor these young composers, myself as well. But I was, young and just starting out in the position, and it made sense. The way other such programs have done is to bring major artists in to serve as faculty, sort of. We don't like to treat it as students and teachers, but as peers and colleagues and mentors. And it just so happened that the Winnipeg New Music Festival happens to be this major international festival that manages to pull major composers, artists, performers from around the world, thanks to, amongst others, our premier patron, Michael Nesbitt. We wouldn't, some of the mentors that we've had have included, for the Composers Institute, have included Sami Musa, Sarah Kirkland Snyder, Eugene Astapov, Jocelyn Morlock, a few times over, Kelly Marie Murphy, Elliot Britton. We've had Michael Doherty, Meredith Monk, Dino Gujaratne, Caleb Yaho, et cetera, like all of these major artists that are coming already to the festival, to the Winnipeg New Music Festival. Now also I get to be, hey, can you guys join us over here and do some one-on-one sessions or business of composition panels or study the scores of these young composers and give them some pointers and that sort of thing. And many of these artists that, Caroline Shaw, for instance, would not have been at the festival. We would not have been able to bring Philip Glass was down the hall from our Composers Institute and kind of sitting in on sessions whenever he could. So we wouldn't have been able to have these artists there without Michael Nesbitt's direct support, who was supporting the appearance of these artists and these major projects that we would put together with them with the WSO.
So you mentioned a whole bunch of the luminaries of the contemporary classical world there. Caroline Shaw, Philip Glass, Missy Mazzoli comes to mind as well.
Right. Of course.
What in this sort of new chapter for the Composers Institute, the Michael Nesbitt Composers Institute, what sorts of things do you think you'll be able to take on in this? Well, we could even look ahead to January, to this first edition of the Composers Institute as part of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. What sorts of things do you think you'll be able to do now? What sorts of things are you dreaming about now with this new dedication of support?
Well, but for one thing, it's to continue the mission. So up until now, we have helped launch the professional careers of 42 emerging Canadian composers. That's, I think, a pretty significant thing. And the goal is to continue to be able to do that at the top level. And it's worth noting that these young composers, emerging composers, composers that are at the cusp of really launching their professional career and need that extra boost on a national or international platform. So, it's a challenging and it's a resource-intensive thing. And to be able to plan ahead, to have this level of support from Michael Nesbitt and from the WSO, to be able to plan years ahead of time actually makes a pretty significant difference, because we can kind of line up artists over time. We could develop more long-term projects. We can start hopefully developing more partnerships across the country and perhaps even internationally eventually, where we can not just have things happening in Winnipeg, but also send these same pieces, these same composers out to partner orchestras, for instance, as possible developments of this concept. So amongst other things, these are some of the ideas that we're batting around.
So when we check in with this in 5-10 years from now with the Composers Institute, what do you hope the legacy of these new dreams, this continuation of the mission, will be, and what do you hope to be able to see in, well, not even just in Winnipeg's contemporary classical music scene, but in Canada more broadly, as a result, not only of the Composer Institute, but of this rededication, this new chapter of support? Yeah,
well, the Winnipeg New Music Festival itself is now, I want to say 35. That's right. Yeah. It's going to be 35 years old in this January. And that already, in those 35 years, of course, it has established an important history, an important role in Canadian music history. When we look back, in a few more years, or decades, or whatever, in the music history books of Canada, WNMF certainly will have played a major role in the development of the arts. Now, one might think that it's, a specific location, a specific city, a specific region, but the impact is easily a national one. The fact that we have commissioned so many works and given Canadian premieres, North American premieres, world premieres of so many works by major artists, Canadian and international, has had an imprint on the country itself and helped to kind of, rising tide raises all boats, or whatever, ships, whatever the saying is. Well, similarly, I think that's where we've already seen the results a little bit of the Composers Institute in its, almost a decade that we've been running this thing, where composers who have come through as emerging composers, participants in the Composers Institute, are now enjoying wonderful professional careers. Thinking of Luis Ramirez and Roy Duncy and Amy Brandon and numerous others who are now getting performed by the Toronto Symphony and by other major orchestras, and are getting major academic positions and so on. So I hope that what WNMF has already built for itself and its role within the national music scene, there'll be some equivalent of that with the Michael Nesbitt Composers Institute, where it'll be seen as a kind of important stepping stone in young composers' careers.
So exciting to see how those careers will continue to develop and the legacy that this will continue to build with the support of Michael Nesbitt and the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. We'll look forward to seeing this new Composers Institute at the Winnipeg New Music Festival this coming January. And we'll have more information at our website, classic107.com, and on the Classic 107 app. Harry Stafylakis, always a pleasure to have you along with us here on Classic 107. And thank you so much for telling us more about this incredible initiative.
I thank you.